David McKee. And you?
Hi, nice to meet you. Sorry, we're chatting away. Hello there. Hello. Oh, hi. You alright? How's life? Yeah, how's it works? Hello, Sam.
There will be 3 pictures from the party, and then you're invited into, this will actually be mentioned to make a presentation of the council in June, when there will be many, many more pictures. Thanks very much indeed. There's another one as well. Do you know Cheryl? I do know Cheryl. But Jim comes from Belfast. Yeah, she's a Canadian by background.
Oh, he's videoing you, Sam. Be careful.
Yes, indeed.
15 years.
Can I welcome the Lord Lieutenant, Aldermen and Alderwomen, distinguished guests, fellow councillors, members of the public and colleagues, officer colleagues to this annual meeting of the Council. The first item on the agenda is the election of the Mayor, of the new Mayor. So can I have nominations for the Mayor for 2019-20, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must admit, it's quite unusual for me to be the first person to stand and speak, so that's really quite nice. But most seriously, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group, I am pleased to stand to propose Councillor Sam Crooks as the Mayor for the coming year. I have known Sam for 28 years, since I joined the Liberal Democrats way back in 1991. But as we know, Sam has been around for a lot longer than that. He's going to tell me off now. Sam was born and brought up in Ireland. He came to Milton Keynes to work at the Open University as the first manager of its International Centre. Sam was a parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Party, it was in those days, in 1974, twice. There were 2 general elections that year, and also in 1979. Very topically, at the moment, Sam was also a candidate for the European parliamentary elections in 1979 as well. He was first elected to Milton Keynes Borough Council, as it was then, in 1980, as the first Liberal, later Liberal Democrat, councillor. Excuse me. He was first elected... I said that, hold on. Sorry. He was a leader of the council from 1987 to 1991, and again from 1992 to 93, and oversaw a number of major initiatives, including the transfer of powers from the then Milton Keynes Development Corporation to the council, and the establishment of the Parks Trust. Sam is currently a Parks Trust trustee. Sam retained his seat until 1993, when he resigned on moving to France with work, to be the Dean of Students and Registrar, where he managed the largest full-time MBA programme in the world outside of the United States. On returning to England in 2002, Sam was again elected to Milton Keynes Council, serving as leader from 2009 to 2010. That's his third stint as leader of the council, and retaining his seat up until 2012. Sam returned in 2013, and since 2014, he has chaired the council's Children and Young People's Select Committee, which is quite appropriate with his interest in education. Sam is active in the community in other ways too. He has been a magistrate since 1983. He was the first chair of the Milton Keynes Commission for Racial Equality, now the Equalities Council, and is a school governor of 3 different primary schools in his ward. He also organises the annual Cornerstone Christmas Appeal, which raises thousands of pounds for local charities each year. Mr. Mayor, the list of Sam's achievements is just too long to list them all this evening. Sam is married to Isabella Musnick, a leading French journalist, who will be Sam's mayoress in the coming year. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, I wish Sam and his wife Isabella a successful year as mayor and mayoress.
Is there a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are apparently undergoing a resurgence in the Liberal Democrats, which is great because apparently Sam has been around so long that he was a member of the Asquith and Lloyd George governments and looks forward to the day where they can form another coalition running local or national government. Sam, however, it's always difficult to do these speeches because I think all the things you're going to say, the list of things that you're going to say is taken. As somebody who has served and is serving as leader of the council, I think it's often easy to underestimate the challenge that comes with running such a wonderful group of people such as yourselves. But he's done it 3 times and is actually part of a select club, one of whom is on my benches and one of whom is actually on the opposition bench and will have this next year, who has served as both leader of the council and mayor. And I think that is a prime example of how somebody serves not just the city, not just their community, but also really the community with a passion and dedication. And I don't think anybody could underestimate how many times Sam has come back on the council because he loves the passion and loves the dedication of serving his community. Often I actually talk about his ward when talking about how officers and how members of the public and councillors interact with each other. The fact that both in Middleton and Broughton, it can come down to a couple of houses who have had a pothole fixed or not had a pothole fixed, a tree cut back or not cut back, or a bush not cut back. And actually, I think a couple of councillors said it at the last meeting. What we are here to do as councillors, first and foremost, is serve our communities. And I don't think anybody can say, without their hand on their heart, regardless of what you think of his politics, or regardless of what you think as an individual, that Sam absolutely serves his community 100%. But it's also, in my view, great because Sam, as our first citizen and going to become our first citizen, is also a top-class individual. I know growing up where he grew up was not easy, but I think having spoken to him on the 8 years I've been on the council, that Irish background and Northern Irish background, you can either go 2 ways. You can become dug in and you can become someone who only thinks one thing, or you can try and reach out, reach consensus and build bridges amongst people and amongst communities. And it's always struck me that Sam is really passionate about 2 things, and some of those things that Councillor McCall has just pointed out. One is about the equality of opportunity. It's about making sure that anybody, no matter where they're brought up or who they're brought up by, has an opportunity in life. And that goes and is mirrored absolutely by his dedication on this council, as I've served on the council with him, towards the children and young people's portfolio. And the other is about equalities in general. And I think that comes from that very strong liberal streak about saying actually everybody is equal and everybody deserves that fair chance in life, but also those things that are passionate and that liberals are passionate about individual equality and liberty. And I think that's absolutely true in everything that comes across. Sam has been immensely useful to me as leader over the past 3 years, particularly around moving forward with Milton Keynes University and the help that he's given to both officers and myself on thoughts about taking that forward, and the fact that I know he understands that sector very well. I think he's a great appointment for Mayor. He's a great appointment for being first citizen of this city, because he'll serve it with passion, he'll serve it with dignity. But as other mayors in the audience will know, it's not just about that. It's about serving it. It's about serving with something else, that little bit of something else, that little bit of grit that makes you really serve the place. And I think Sam has that in abundance. And I look forward to working with Sam, because I know he'll do a great job as mayor. And actually, he won't just chair this council brilliantly. He'll do a smack-up job of being first citizen of Milton Keynes. So I move to second Sam Crooks as our first citizen.
I'm obliged to ask, are there any other nominations? No. So are there any other councillors who wish to speak in support of Sam? Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Crooks, I have to apologise firstly. I'm slightly underprepared. As someone who knows my ward of Stantonbury well, up to about 12 days ago I thought I wouldn't have to make this speech. But yet, to the delight of the Labour Party, here I am. As still a relatively new councillor, it amazed me to look back at the roles you have held, and it's already been mentioned by Councillor Marland and McCall. You've represented this council for decades. You've been a parish councillor, leader of the Lib Dem group, leader of the council twice, school governor, trustee of Bletchley Park and dozens of other local organisations, chaired numerous committees, been vice chair to many more. The list goes on and on and on. If Milton Keynes was a video game, by becoming mayor, Councillor Crooks, you will have completed it. But that means also, in fairness to Councillor Crooks, you are one of the most qualified councillors to become mayor of our great city. A city I know you care deeply about. I have no doubt at all you will take the role of mayor as seriously as you have all of the other roles you have held at this council and around Milton Keynes. I would also describe you as well as a pretty smooth political operator. Indeed, and perhaps in Liberal Democrat fashion, I've stolen many of your ideas. So I'm very pleased you're going to be taken out of the game for the next 12 months. And we have many different views, but I respect you immensely. You are a tenacious ward councillor. You are able to demonstrate a genuine difference to people's lives over the years. You're also a good campaigner, much to the annoyance of my group. And I also want to touch on an issue very few of us dare to mention, and that is Europe. I think it's fair to say we have polar opposite views when it comes to the UK's membership of the European Union. But we are both of the opinion that Milton Keynes is a leading European city, and will continue to be that, regardless of what happens with Brexit. Much of your life is very much rooted in Europe, not least with your wife, Isabel. And I believe you'll be a European mayor for a leading European city. May I wish you the very best of luck for the year ahead, and I look forward to working with you and looking back this time next year on what will be, I have no doubt, a memorable year. Thank you.
If there are no other people who wish to speak, is the election of Councillor Crooks agreed? Agreed. And so I'm pleased to declare that Councillor Sam Crooks is elected Mayor for 2019 to 20.
May I just say, before I go on, thank you very much to all of those who proposed me. For a moment I wondered if you were actually talking about me, but we'll see later on. I now, if I may, invite my wife I want to invite Debbie to present my wife with her chain. Later on the agenda, we will come to the formal vote of thanks to Martin and to Debbie, and I will say a few words then. But at this point, I'm asked to make my acceptance speech, and I want, first of all, to join with Martin in welcoming all of the guests that we have tonight. I'm very touched to see so many of my friends and colleagues here. I'm very grateful for that and very appreciative. At the beginning of their year in office, each mayor sets out the vision of what they want to achieve. And I'm going to be guided by two principles. The first one is that the mayor must be truly representative of the whole borough, whether urban or rural, black, brown or white, man or woman, regardless of age, sexuality and politics. The mayoralty is not my office. It belongs to the people of Milton Keynes, and that's what I want them to feel. And second, as Alex touched on, I want to share my huge pride in the wonderful city that we have created and are constantly renewing. We have moved from the historic small towns and villages of North Bucks to become one of England's top cities and an international beacon for great urban design. And that's truly a triumph for all of those who are living here. Within those principles, I have 5 particular interests that I want to follow. Douglas touched on the first. I want as much as possible to work with young people and with the Youth Cabinet, listening to what they say. For they are our future. The city that we have to go on building is not going to be the city of me and other people here. It's going to be their city, and we must build the city that they want. To that end, I'll be instigating an annual Mayor's Award, acknowledging the part that children and young people play in student voice, and how best they can prepare for taking part in the democratic process when they become adults, in order to influence what will be their city. I came to Milton Keynes from Ireland, and I'm very proud of that, as Pete said. I delight in the diversity of this city and in the invitations that I have already received from Sri Lankan, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Polish, Syrian, and other groups. We are blessed as a city to have so many different heritages. And I ask everyone to share those heritages, because then we will all be enriched. I also come from a military family, and as Pete said, I've lived part of my life in Belfast. I'm proud, therefore, that the Council has signed the Armed Forces Covenant, and I will make today the same commitment to our forces that they make to us every day and in so many different parts of the world. And in doing so, I want to acknowledge the huge role that Councillor Terry Baines is already playing as the Council's Armed Forces champion. Well done, Terry.
The council's income is becoming increasingly dependent on business rates. Local companies don't have votes, and I believe that we councillors sometimes underestimate the importance of those companies. In consultation with the Cabinet, other political groups, and our professional staff, I hope to enhance the business sector's relationship with the Council to our mutual benefit. And finally, my fifth point, I know that the lively, energetic and prosperous city we see all around us masks worrying levels of poverty, unemployment, domestic violence, inadequate housing, and problems of physical and mental health. I want to work with the voluntary sector, who play so important a part in our local economy, complementing the Council's work or stepping in where we can no longer participate. And to this end, I have nominated as my charities this year the YMCA, who will build on Martin's work with the bus shelter for young people in difficulties, and also the Milton Keynes Hospital Cancer Centre appeal as my charities. My family, others in the Council, and others amongst our professional staff have been victims of cancer, and I want to recognise that. I would ask you, therefore, when you move out for the reception afterwards, to visit Lorraine on the YMCA stand and Vanessa on the hospital stand in the lounge. So in summary, I'm aiming this year for a mayoralty that expresses, first of all, and most important, our pride in our city. I want one that is representative of everyone who lives here. I want it to be a city and a mayoralty that looks forward to young people as our future. I want it to be enriched by so many of our different heritages. I want it to recognise the importance of our armed forces and of the business community. And I want it to build on the work of the voluntary sector. But above all, I ask one thing, that we should not be complacent about our success. We cannot let Milton Keynes become a two-speed city. Pride in our borough, which is what I want to achieve, must be something in which everyone who lives here, every one of our residents, can genuinely participate. And I ask you all to share in my vision for this year. Thank you. Now, I said that my first duty would be to invite a vote of thanks to the retiring mayor. Just before I come to that, may I thank Martin personally for two things. First of all, for your generosity in giving me things to do that have enabled me to learn. At no stage did I think I was just getting the cast-offs that Martin didn't want. He chose many of the events that I went to, and from those I learnt a lot. I thank you for that. The other point is that Martin realised that the mayoralty is a continuum from one year to the next. And he was very careful, therefore, always to consult me about precedents that he might be setting, to make sure that I wouldn't be at ill at ease in any way in continuing those. And so, Martin, thank you for that as well. Leader, would you please move the vote of thanks to Martin? I will, and I will remain seated. I don't need to stand up. Mr. Mayor, I think I do this every year to outgoing mayors, and it's always difficult to strike a balance between talking about what you've done and talking about the individual. I always start by saying, no mayor could really do the job that you do without the support of your family and friends. And therefore, I would like to thank your Mayoress, Debbie, for the work that she's done over the past 12 months, not just in the support that she's given you, but also in her role as Mayoress, and it's a role in itself. So I would like to invite the Council and members of the audience to thank Debbie in particular. Mr. Mayor, you said last year that you would complete 440 million bell rings or something, each one for every second that Milton Keynes has been a city. Now, some would argue that would be zero, and others would argue that we are a city, because if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, we are in fact a duck. However, you did tell me one story, and your campanology, I think bell ringing is called, is that right? Campanology was delayed somewhat by a car crash that you had in June, whereas apparently you emerged unscathed from this car crash, but as the other person was carted off to hospital, apparently they could be heard shouting, "I've killed the mayor, I've killed the mayor, what have I done? I've killed the mayor of Milton Keynes." Luckily, that person was okay, but luckily you were able, I believe, last night or yesterday, to complete your full peal of bells, your full peal of ringing, and I think that is a fantastic achievement to do so many bell ringing. And not only is that your passion, it also coincides with an old and strong collegiate faith that you hold. What I want to talk about as your year of mayor is the way that you brought the city together. I think if I was to pick out any one individual event, we all know that over the past couple of years there's been difficult politics, both at a national level and an international level. Too many times, I think, as councillors and as members of the public and others, we've stood at the rows and had to commemorate yet another atrocity or yet another happening in another place. I remember standing with you at the rows not 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now. Yet another event had taken place. And it's at times like that, people do not look to the leader of the city, people don't look to councillors, but they do look for leadership. And I think that is the role of the first citizen of the city. It is non-political or apolitical. And it is filled with a sense of civic pride and oneness with our place. And actually the words that you used to describe, I think Sam, you just said them yourself. It doesn't matter in Milton Keynes where you're from. We are a city that has come together, both people who were here before Milton Keynes was established in Wolverton or Olney or Stony Stratford or Newton Blossomville or wherever you are from. But also we are a city of immigrants. We're a city that has come here. Everybody who came here wanted to make a better life for themselves, a better life for themselves and their children and future generations. And actually, we can speak with that voice, and you spoke with that voice when leading us through those dark times. And it's that I want to talk about, and that I think I offer you my vote of thanks and the vote of thanks of the Labour group, because cheering us is one thing, holding us in some sort of order in meetings is difficult, but actually what the vast majority of people see are things like the visit of the Duchess of Cambridge yesterday, or the visit of the Armed Forces Day, or when you go and represent us abroad, or when all those other mayors come to the MK Dons Stadium. That's what the vast majority of people see about the mayor. It isn't in here. It's out there being our first citizen. And actually, the point where we needed you most, the point where the city needed its civic dignitary most, is the point, I think, where you came through. And the words of passion that you spoke about, coming together and not allowing those that hate defeat us. But actually, Milton Keynes is a city of love and a city of togetherness. And I think those are the words that I offer my vote of thanks for, and I think the people of Milton Keynes got a very good mayor in you, but ultimately, on that day, at that time, you made Milton Keynes feel special. You reassured the people of Milton Keynes, and that's what we asked for from our first citizen. So I thank you on behalf of my group, and I thank you on behalf of the city. Thank you.
I'm looking for a seconder for the motion. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was putting some ideas together of what I might say this evening, I did the classic Google News search to see what you've been up to over the last 12 months. I typed in Martin Pecci, and I was shocked to find at the top of the page it showed the Times 2019 Rich List. And I thought, goodness me, he's had a good year. I didn't realise it was such a well-paid job. However, before I got too excited, I double-checked, and it's bad news, Councillor Crooks. The mention was actually for East End property developer Sir Jack Pecci. And as SEO goes, you know, Martin was picked up. But under the anomaly of the Times Rich List was a wealth of articles highlighting the great work Councillor Pecci has done over the year. You've been on visits to highlight our future as a city, such as the opening of the UK's largest electric vehicle rapid charging hub. You cut the ribbon at Onron's new robotic innovation lab. You've attended religious events to promote our great diversity, including the 40th anniversary of MK's synagogue, the annual iftar at Campbell Park, and the launch of the Peace Walk. I genuinely couldn't count the number of businesses and charities you visited over your time as mayor, and picking up in similar vein to former mayor Councillor David Hopkins, Councillor Pecci took to a bit of rock and roll, getting guitar tutorial when he visited Rock School MK. The bad news is I couldn't find a video. And of course, you have been the mayor that saw Milton Keynes Dons promoted. That's worth a round of applause, I think. And over the year, as it tends to happen, we've bumped into each other at numerous events. And the one thing I have to say is no matter what the event was, how boring it was, you showed genuine and real interest. And, you know, you weren't faking it. It was 100% real. But I think it's important because, Councillor Pecci, actually you take a real interest in people and you have a real passion for all things Milton Keynes. We've had a few disagreements in this chamber over the past 12 months, but being mayor and, as Councillor Marner said, chairing full council is a tough task, perhaps the most difficult role as mayor. A room full of councillors split into 3 distinct groups, ready to pounce at any moment and all with their eyes at you. It's a tough job, and I think you've got through the year relatively unscathed. And I'd say you've never shied away from looking at how we could improve processes and the way we could better debate within this chamber. Again, you also have managed to avoid getting involved in any of the political fighting. No easy task when there is a bun fight going on. I'd also say it was good to see you in the Mayor's Parlour after full council on regular occasions. Now, for those who don't know, the Mayor's Parlour, for some strange reason, perhaps says more about our livers on the Tory side than anything else, but it seems to be a bit of a Tory club. But Councillor Pecci was brave over the year and joined us for a drink after full council. Most of the chat was with Councillor Andrew Geary about cricket rather than a debrief on council, but it was great to see you. You have been a dedicated servant to Milton Keynes. Over many years as a councillor, you held the role as first citizen with equal dedication and a real sense of public duty. So on behalf of the Conservative group, thank you for your service as mayor, and we'd like to also share our appreciation to your wife Debbie for her service as well. I hope you look back on your year with fond memories. Thank you.
Councillor Bradburn, I believe you wish to speak. Robin Bradburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the pleasure
to propose the Liberal Democrat group's vote of thanks for Councillor Martin Petchey, our outgoing mayor. Firstly, I would say, as the third speaker, sometimes your lines are stolen. Thank you, Councillor Walker. But firstly, I would like to say that I didn't know Martin very well before last year, but getting to know him at mayor's briefings and events that we attended together, I have seen the service that he's given to Milton Keynes in this last 12 months and learnt of the service over the past years he's given to Milton Keynes. I recall it was about this time last year I attended the Iftar community celebrations at Wolverton Mosque, and the Mayor, Martin, was there with me. I, being new to one of these functions, the hosts brought out a superb buffet, and I was a little bit nonplussed. There was no cutlery. Martin pointed out to me that hands were invented long before spoons and knives. Needless to say, the host took pity on us uneducated people and supplied later on. Like Martin, I have followed the MK Dons through their journey in Milton Keynes. I am a regular season ticket holder, and like him, I've been on the roller coaster journey of the highs and lows that befall a football club. I recall the former leader of this council, Councillor Andrew Geary, at one of these many do's, suggested that a measure of success of a mayor was the measure of success of Milton Keynes Dons. So well done, Martin. You are the first Labour mayor to have a promotion. I think the party to the right need to up their game. 2 relegations. You have sent us on an upward spiral. And through you, Mayor, Pete, the last time there was a Liberal Democrat mayor, we were promoted to the championship. No pressure there, Sam. Moving to Martin's duties in this chamber. Using football analysis, he had a capacity crowd at his June 1st council about the very vexed topic of illegal encampments. He handled a very difficult and rather emotive meeting with patience and good humour. Admittedly, he did have the Police and Crime Commissioner present and the Chief Constable if he needed it. All we needed was the Thames Valley Police mounted section, and it would have been like a feisty game at the Stadium MK. He has been innovative, as Councillor Walker has said at meetings, by moving agenda items to help people who've come distances rather than sit for hours and listen to us droning on, and I will try not to be any longer than need be. And also the alternate speakers in debates has made the debates more understandable and flowing. Martin, you've had a good year, and your wife Debbie has supported you well. On behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, I move these thanks and the thanks of Milton Keynes as a whole. Well done.
Are there other councillors who would like to speak? In which case, may I ask if the vote of thanks is agreed? Agreed. Martin, I have to present you with the past mayor's badge.
Thank you very much.
Isabel, may I ask you to do the same in respect of Debbie? And now, Martin, it's your turn.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, thank you for the privilege of being able to reflect a little on my time as mayor. It was also my privilege to have been the last mayor to have been able to call Kevin Wilson to speak. But I won't say anything more about that because there'll be other opportunities later on in the meeting. And as to my relationship to Jack Petchey, Alex, my genealogical part of my family have been trying to establish a connection for ages. My very first engagement as mayor, and the very next day after my election last year, was to a performance of Macbeth. So when I started thinking about what I might say tonight, at first I thought I could make this a theme of the speech, you know, the sort of thing. Not 3 witches on Brickhill Heath, but 3 councillors in Starbucks. Councillor thou art, deputy mayor thou art, mayor thou shalt be. It doesn't really work, unfortunately, because Debbie didn't have to take any drastic action on my behalf like Lady Macbeth. As you can see, David, my predecessor, is still with us, and I hope in rude health. So I turned to finding a good quote to start, and looking online, came across this from Lyndon Johnson. When the burdens of the presidency seemed unusually heavy, I always remind myself that it could be worse. I could be a mayor. Now, he was, of course, talking of an executive mayor, and here I'm going to make a slight diversion. In finding this last quote, I came across another quote. It's not really a memorable quote at all. I wouldn't vote for the mayor. It's not just because he didn't invite me to dinner, but because on my way into town from the airport, there were such enormous potholes. Now, as I said, it's not a particularly memorable quote at all, but the memorable thing is that it's attributed to Fidel Castro. Now, the idea that the Cuban Revolution may have been started because of the potholes in Havana's roads is a very intriguing one. And it shows, Emily, I think you've got the pothole brief now, it shows, Emily, what a burden rests on your shoulders. So, still seeking a theme, I turned to my ancient Penguin Dictionary of Quotations, which I had bought at university, to have quotes to start essays with. But all he could come up with was the last 2 lines of a poem by Robert Graves called Welsh Incident, in which the Mayor of Criccieth, with the help of the Harlech Town Band, confronts amorphous sea creatures. Not something I've encountered in my year, I must say, with or without the new Bradwell Silver Band. And the last 2 lines are, what did the mayor do? And I was coming to that. And I suppose that's what I should be doing, so I will. A lot of people ask me as mayor, are you enjoying it? And there are many things to enjoy as mayor. And first of all, I was going to talk about the wonderful privilege to be invited as mayor to see all the home matches of the NK Dons, and it's a great privilege to see them promoted back to League One at the first attempt, as it's been said, even though they did leave it a bit late. But as Andrew Geary has been pointing out to me several times, the last 2 Tory mayors have seen the Dons relegated. So it's taken the Labour mayor to see them on the rise again. And so councillors who are Don supporters will know what to do in the future. I was also invited to all the concerts of the Milton Keynes City Orchestra, which I very much enjoyed. But I should be the last mayor to be able to do that, because the orchestra, after more than 40 years, is having to close. And I hope, Jenny, in your new cultural brief, that you'll be able to support moves to revive it. Milton Keynes was saved from relegation in the Cultural League table, however, by the opening of the splendidly enlarged Milton Keynes Gallery, for which I cut the ribbon a couple of months ago. It was a splendid Milton Keynes occasion, as I arrived in a driverless pod, and the scissors to cut the ribbon were brought in by one of those dinky Starship robots. Like every mayor, I became quite adept at cutting ribbons. I was even asked to open the new toilets at York House in Stony Stratford. In my opening speech, I made all the appropriate double entendres, so no doubt to your relief, I shan't repeat them. My 2 predecessors presided over parts of the Milton Keynes 50 celebrations, but it fell to me to be able to commemorate the centenary of the end of the First World War. And on a slightly serious note, though it was billed as the war to end wars, The subsequent peace, of course, only lasted 20 years. And in the light of the revival of the far-right and nationalist movements throughout Europe and throughout the world, it's a salutary reminder of the fragility of peace. Some engagements can be quite demanding. I attended as mayor some 6 graduation ceremonies. And these are very joyous occasions. I know that because I attended a 7th for my own son's graduation. But in contrast to those ceremonies when I graduated, when I was young, I recall a lot of mumbling in Latin and a whole row of us bowing to the Vice-Chancellor. These days, every graduate marches across the stage to loud applause to shake hands. And over 6 ceremonies, that's an awful lot of clapping. There can be longueurs. At one engagement, supper was billed for 8, but it didn't start till nearly 11 because of the late arrival of the representative of an Ashanti king. So, making small talk over the meal, I said he must have had a very long journey. Perhaps hold-ups on the motorway had caused his late arrival. Oh no, he replied, I only come from Fishermead. Whoops. Now, I was invited to the launch of a group to encourage and train people, especially women in business, in the art of speaking in public. And one of their suggested techniques was to always have a prop, and this is my prop. It's a stole made from a Ghanaian weave called kente, invented to wear at the courts of Ashanti monarchs. Back to them again. Every colour has a meaning, every weave symbolises something. And there's even one to signify democratic rule. And as an aside, we don't have any formal wear, no gowns, for example, as Milton Keynes councillors. But thank goodness for that. But maybe how about stoles in the kente weave symbolising democratic rule as our official garb. But this prop is to remind me of the many cultural and national groups I spent time with as mayor. They're a symbol of the diversity of our society, as Sam and Pete have both said. And the fact that they invite the mayor is a demonstration of their intention to use that diversity to contribute to make the city a separate place, but to the strength and unity of the new city. I've also celebrated with, I think, every religious group in Milton Keynes, from breaking the Ramadan fast with several Muslim groups at the start of my year, to meeting Hindus from southern India at their Ugadi celebrations last week, taking Christians, Buddhists, Jews and other many groups in between. And many of these groups give you a little book on their core beliefs. So in the Mayor's Parlour there's a little library which anybody whose son or daughter is studying comparative religion would find extremely useful to follow through. And I've met many wonderful charities over my year. 2 smaller ones deserve much wider recognition. One is Tools for Self-Reliance, based in Pennyland, where old and ancient tools are refurbished, often by people with learning difficulties, and are then shipped out to new craftsmen in Africa or South Asia. And one called Super Shoes, based in Kingston, where children who have childhood charities are given shoes especially decorated with something in their favourite theme, whether it's the Dons Football Club or Doctor Who or whatever, with some design based on that to lift them through their really disturbing period of treatment. Those are 2 that, I mean, I've been to several, those 2 that stand out. But of course, my own charity, the bus shelter, has gone from strength to strength. And this is the moment where I'd like to present them with a cheque from the various contributions that have been made to the Mayor's Charity Fund. So Pam, there's the cheque, and may you carry on the good work for many years to come.
Thank you very much.
And got the right place in my notes. The last time I had one of these was at a Christmas function where I told my standard Christmas jokes, only to find that nobody was laughing because the microphone wasn't actually turned on. Rather than that round the back, I will also say, as Peter's remind people, as Peter said, that I was, this time last year, I said I was going to try and ring at every tower, every ringable tower in the borough. And that challenge, as Pete said, finished last night with a court appeal at Old Wolverton. And so if any councillors want to reflect, congratulate me on that, I'm sure Pam's charity would welcome a small donation. And so I must come now to those I need to thank. First of all, to my wife Debbie, who I know found being mayoress very difficult, but she's always a great source of support. Sam, who was deputy mayor, stood in sometimes at very short notice. Miranda and then Emma, as the mayor's executive assistants, they both did so wonderfully to keep me in line and to organise the various mayor's events. To Simon, whose notes on the conduct of council meeting I so conspicuously failed to follow, and to Chris, my driver, who managed to correct my own personal predilection to arrive late on every occasion. But my thanks are also due, most of all, to you, my fellow councillors, for according me the privilege of electing me mayor for last year. So that's it. And to return just once more to Macbeth, at the end, Burnham Wood to Dunstan Lane has come, and I bet that's the first time the public gallery has been compared to a forest. Burnham Wood to Dunstan has come, and so my time as mayor is over. The last lines of the script of my mayoral year are written, and they are fade to black and curtain. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I would now like to invite nominations for Deputy Mayor, and in accordance with the agreed selection criteria, that places the nomination with the Conservative group. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2008, the then leader of the Conservative Party opposition, David Cameron, encouraged his good friend but also general troublemaker, Boris Johnson, to stand for Mayor of London. And for 8 years, it kept Bojo out of Cameron's hair and relieved him of some of the stresses that are placed on a party leader. I've often taken my inspiration from David Cameron, which is why I'm delighted to propose Councillor Andrew Geary to be Deputy Mayor of Milton Keynes. But it is with genuine pride I am able to be here this evening and propose a giant of both Milton Keynes and local Conservative Party politics, a councillor who has served Milton Keynes, led Milton Keynes, and is one of just the few councillors that has a real and genuine understanding of both rural and urban Milton Keynes communities. I can safely say he is the only councillor I've been on the phone to talking about regeneration in the Lakes Estate while he was lambing in rural North Buckinghamshire. I am lucky enough to describe Councillor Andrew Geary as both a friend and a colleague, and I am delighted he will take up the mantle as Deputy Mayor this year and Mayor next year. I have no doubt he will do us all proud, and I'll reserve even more mayoral banter for next May, and for now I offer you our best wishes for the year ahead.
Is there a seconder for Andrew's nomination? Norman?
Thank you, Ben. Excuse my voice, it's going away from that. We keep the remarks fairly short for the Deputy Mayor, don't we? Just can't hack technology. I'll start again. We keep our remarks to Deputy Mayor fairly short, don't we? As Alex says, keep the long ones for next year. That'll probably save Andrew some embarrassment. I'll save my tales for later. I got to know Andrew when he was the leader of a minority administration on this council, and I was the new, actually, leader of this group, the second largest group on the council, therefore the opposition group. I'm always suspicious of Conservatives, I can't think why, and we developed, I think, a good working relationship, which I think was based partly on the fact that partly on the fact I think we both try to transcend at times the single party issues. We also have to share an interest in cricket. We also share an interest in jokes. And I'm not going to make any more because Andrew always pinches my jokes. So whenever I make a nice joke in there in his office, out he comes in chamber the following week. It's not always you realise that people are listening to anything you say. We had an interesting experience, I believe, for about a week. We served in cabinet together along with the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party when we have one of those funny things that happens in politics. Even better is the cabinet had no decision-making powers, which you won't have up there either, so I hope you get used to that. I think what Andrew will bring, I happen to think he has integrity. I happen to think he has judgment, and I happen to think I know he's got a sense of humour. And when you're sitting up there, or they're all handy, it's one of those jobs, Andrew, it's useful if you've done it, then you can talk more about it, so if you do want to chat about it sometime, I will. I'm also, the Mayor's broken my record of 15 years of being leader then Mayor. Of course, you're going to follow it off. So that's the end of my record, so that's all there is to that. So I think he'll make a splendid Deputy Mayor. We'll see how he gets on before we say to make a decent Mayor. I wish you every luck. On behalf of my group, I'm very happy to propose Andrew Geary as Deputy Mayor.
Are there other nominations? Are there other councillors who would wish to speak? Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supposed to be speaking to support this nomination on behalf of my group, but I'm struggling. I hadn't heard this fact that the previous two Tory mayors have got the Dons relegated. And I know Councillor A. Geary is a fine follower of tradition. I think we may need a rethink here. The simplest solution, I believe, is for him to defect. I didn't say where.
You can.
Mayors, some deputy mayors, when you hear the nomination from the other group, you can easily imagine them in the role. You can easily imagine them up there. And others it's more difficult. And for me, Councillor A. Geary was in the second category. Not because I had any doubts of his capability, his experience or his enthusiasm. I simply could not imagine the floor of this council chamber without him on it. To think of this council losing the voices of Councillors Dransfield, Kay Wilson and temporarily A. Geary in such short order is unthinkable. Alex Walker earlier described Sam Crooks as being out of the game for 12 months. Councillor A. Geary is potentially taking a 24-month sentence. Can you imagine 2 whole years without the catchphrase, "I wasn't intending to speak tonight, but..." I wonder if he knows what he's let himself in for. What skills does he bring for the role? He's well known as a farmer. He's clearly experienced in herding unruly sheep. No use at all. Also an experienced lammer. And I have to say, given that there were many new councillors on the council this year, I'm sure he will have a particular eye for new members and making sure they settle in and they find their feet. He's brought leadership to this city. He follows Councillors Miles and Crooks in moving from leader to mayor, and I think the experience on both roles will serve him well. I know he was a keen ambassador for our great city, and I know that will be part of this role that he will relish and that he will thrive on. Councillor Walker used the phrase I was going to sum up, a giant of Milton Keynes. I think it's a fair description of the man, and we wish him every success in the role of Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Is the appointment of Councillor Andrew Geary as Deputy Mayor agreed? I declare that Councillor Andrew Geary is appointed Deputy Mayor for 2019-20. The photographer? No. You just pass it up. Lisa has come forward. Isa, could I ask you to present Lisa with the Deputy Mayor's chain? We now move on to the procedural part of the meeting, and I have to ask the Chief Executive if there are any apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. We have received an apology from Councillors Jenkins, McLean, Belakeness, Trendle, and apologies from a number of elder women and elder men who were also unable to be present.
Thank you. We have the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 20th of March 2019. May they be signed as a correct record. Do members or any officers wish to disclose any interest that they might have in the items that we are about to discuss? I'm taking silence to mean consent. We now come to a very sad, unexpected part of the meeting, and that is that I have to announce that Kevin, I think as everybody knows, the Councillor Kevin Wilson died last week. We all know what a huge contribution Kevin made to his party, to his parish, and to this city. And for that reason, what I would like to do, with your agreement, is to set aside time at the June Council, when there will be many more opportunities to make contributions about Kevin's legacy, both from members of the Council and from members of the public, and particularly from members of the Wolfton Community Council, which was so much a part of his life. With your agreement, however, I would like just to invite one representative from each of the political parties to say something on this occasion, and then we will take much more time at the June Council. Leader.
Thank you. You are quite right that none of us expected to make the speech today, but I think many of you will know that Kevin was very poorly. I think what's taken all of us by surprise is the speed at which he did deteriorate. Kevin had 4 passions. The first was his family, and family always came first with Kevin, no matter what it was. Although I did make a joke, which was sort of like, one day I know Kevin, he will say to Pam, come here, Pam, come here, Pam. Tell Milton Keynes Labour Party I love them. But unfortunately, that was not to be the case. He did absolutely love Pam and Karen, and he loved being a grandfather. That was his first passion. The second, as I may have mentioned, and as everybody may know, was the Labour Party, and particularly the Labour Party in Milton Keynes. Kevin was first elected to this authority in 1978, I think, which meant that on and off his service to this council was over 40 years. There's not a person on these benches that wasn't inducted into the Labour Party by going to New Bradwell Labour Hall and being shown how to use the risograph and how to input the marked register into Labour Party Contact Creator in quite the technical detail that Kevin liked to show us. Because that was Kevin, for those that don't know, before he became a full-time councillor and a full-time sort of stander-upper for local government, really, in all its guises. He was a teacher. I know he taught one particular person in this council, and I know we like to joke about it, but I do know Alex, for those that don't know Kevin taught Alex, he was really proud of you. He may not have agreed with your politics, but he certainly saw an individual who was willing to speak his mind, and actually he was really, really proud of you. Disappointed, but proud of you. And then came Milton Keynes Dons. I don't think Pete and John are in the audience. This story's been told to me by Kevin, and it was told to me by Pete, which means that by form of triangulation, it's true. At the time, Milton Keynes Dons were called Wimbledon, which is a small part of a bit of London that has some sort of tennis tournament that happens every year. They weren't, let's put this straight, Wimbledon would cease to exist if it was made to stay in that part of London. It wanted to move. There'd been talk about moving to Ireland, there'd been talk about all sorts of things, and it was a club that was literally not going anywhere. And look at the problems Bolton are in at the moment. It was a club that was going to cease to exist. And apparently this madman called Pete Winkleman turned up at the then leader of the council's door, and the leader of the council was Kevin, and said, can we move what will become MK Dons here? And Kevin said, sounds okay to me. Because Kevin had that unique streak of not just being interesting and being sort of getting things done, and my God, did he annoy me. The way that you used to say to him, please don't do that, Kevin, and then 3 minutes before you found out the deadline, you found out that he'd done it and there was no way to reverse it. But he was visionary. And he said this to me, he said, well, Pete asked me, well, he said it in a slightly less passionate way than this because it was Kevin, and he always sounded a little bit like he was Tigger's best friend. But he said, Pete said to me, I want to move Premier League football here, or I want to move professional football here. And Kevin thought about it, and Kevin said, give it a shot. You know, there's a visionary sitting in the audience, and there was luckily a visionary sitting in this chair. Because if Pete had tried to bring Milton Keynes Dons here and we'd have failed, what did we lose? We'd have been in the same position. We didn't have a professional football club, and there wouldn't have been a professional football club to make jokes next year about Andrew. But there wouldn't have been professional football without Kevin. But if we succeeded, and by God did we succeed, we'll have a UEFA stadium capable of delivering the Rugby World Cup in 2050 and the UEFA Women's Championship in 2021. That was a cross-party thing ultimately. But it took that spark of vision from Kevin to say, okay, let's give it a shot. And he was so proud, because Hannah went to see him last Monday. He was so proud to know that the Dons had gone up. A bit disappointed that they'd gone down twice in the past couple of years, but so proud to know they'd gone up. And he was, in the last match but one, still in his seat as a paid season ticket holder, and he used to take the grandkids, and he loved it there. And I know that Pete has expressed his condolences, but really, as a city, we wouldn't be where we were without Kevin Wilson, because the Dons are just one thing. Whether it's about growth, and we have discussions about growth, or whether it was about his support for parishes, or whether it was those little things. Remember, Milton Keynes is wholly parished. It's wholly parished because when in 1997 we became a unitary, Kevin said, let's parish Milton Keynes. And when I go and do the LGA stuff, I say, Milton Keynes is fully parished. And lots of other leaders say, oh, that must be a pain for you. And I say, no, not really, because actually that's the level of politics that we aspire to the most. Actually getting things done in our communities. You know, we look on these benches and that benches, how many people have come through parish councils because they just want to help their community. And that was Kevin through and through, because his fourth passion, and probably only second to his family, was his real love for Woughton and the Woughton community. The fact that for 40 years, if not more, he's fought for the regeneration, proper regeneration of Woughton. For 40 years, he stood up for Netherfield and Coffee Hall and Bean Hill and Pertwee Bridge and all of those places that make up the wonderful Woughton Community Council. And I look at Woughton Community Council today, and I know Donna is in the audience. It wouldn't be what it was without Kevin. Parish governance in this country would not be what it was without Kevin, because I've been overwhelmed by the number of people, both in local government and community government, that have emailed to want to come and pay their respects to Kevin, because he did a hell of a lot of work through the LGA, and a hell of a lot, which is the Local Government Association, and a hell of a lot of work through NALC, which is the body nationally that helps parish councils improve. But look at Woughton. Look at the resources that it puts into Woughton, which is one of our most deprived communities. Look at the people it helps. Look at the services that it provides, and it is a model for community governance up and down the country. And it absolutely adored the place, to the point that sort of me and Rob have sat in meetings with him. Kevin, in the only way Kevin do, would say, well, you can't take that off me now because I put it in the budget for next year. And me and Rob would say, thanks very much, thanks very much, Kevin. I believe that's the way you ran the council in 1997. And I have no idea how he managed to do that with officers, but he did. There are very few people in life that have the ability to combine the skills of leadership, but also being a good human being. Having just the common decency to be Kevin. There was only one Kevin. I will miss, as leaders do, being able to turn around and say, can you give me 4 minutes because it's 2 minutes to go till the guillotine. But I'll also miss his wit, because there was some underneath the gruff exterior. I'll miss the fact that he was a fellow Lancastrian running this city. I'll miss the fact that he was able to give particularly sound advice. But I think what this city will miss, ultimately, is his service to just knowing when to say the right thing and put people just on the right track without necessarily stamping his feet and shouting about it and banging the table, because he wasn't that sort of man. Very few people in life are cast in the mould that Kevin was cast in. With humility and with grace, but also leadership. And we will miss him. His family will desperately miss him. The Milton Keynes Labour Party won't be able to replace him. The Dons won't be here without him. And by God, the community that he loved will really, really miss him. I know that Donna has big shoes to fill, and I'm more than certain she's capable of doing so. But Kevin is not replaceable. He's not replaceable for any of us. But he would know that the show goes on more than anybody. He won't want us to be sad for him. Yes, let's remember him. But the best way to remember him is looking at that stadium and thinking, that's what we can do as councillors. That's the change we can affect. Look at Woughton. That's what we can do. That's why we are in this chamber. That's why we serve our local populations. That's why we get elected in the first place, to do stuff. And that's how we remember Kevin, both as an individual, but as a man that really did things for this city and for his community. Thank you, Kevin Wilson. Alderman Kevin Wilson.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a special speech, Pete, thank you. The news of Kevin's passing has hit everyone in the Conservative group without exception very hard and with deep sadness. His love for his party, his ward and for Milton Keynes was unrivalled. He was an immense champion of Milton Keynes, and that is why Kevin is and will always be known in the Conservative group as the best MP we never had. And coming from a Conservative group, that's quite something. I do, as Councillor Marland mentioned, do want to briefly talk about my relationship with Kevin.
because he did play a small but important role, and I hope in his life I played a small and important role in his. Firstly, he was a reluctant mentoring figure in my life, and I think that reluctance was shared on both sides. I felt I couldn't possibly take advice from an old school Labour academic, and he thought he couldn't possibly offer advice to an aspiring young nasty Tory. However, it somehow strangely worked, and he regularly offered his words of wisdom, and I always accepted them. And that was at college, but also when I worked for Ian Stewart straight out of university, most recently when I served with him on this council, and specifically the Regeneration MK Committee. And secondly, and if you thought he was disappointed that I became a Conservative, he'll be angry to know that he facilitated my career's kind of lift-off moment. And as has been mentioned, he was my lecturer at college, and the year he was my lecturer was 2009. The 2010 election was closing in. And in a fair and balanced way, Kevin invited in the Labour MP at the time, Phyllis Starkey, and only the Labour MP, Phyllis Starkey, to give a speech to the class and then to take a Q&A. Now, most of my contemporaries in the class were Labour supporters, so it was a fairly warm audience for her. Kevin briefed us all at the start, and he said, "You've got 2 questions each, and please be polite." Kevin came to me, my first question, and I calmly but assertively asked Dr. Phyllis Starkey what she would do when she lost the next election. It didn't go well, and Kevin didn't let me have my second question. And I don't even know if I got an answer, so yeah. But I remember that time with Kevin at college with great fondness and learning. I was never great at school, and Kevin is one of the few teachers that I do remember. And I'm just one of hundreds, but perhaps thousands of people who he made an impact on, and no doubt will remember him as well. And I think actually he took great pride and happiness in the success of others, which is telling of his character. A giant of local government doesn't do Kevin justice. One thing that stands out for me and for many in my group is, despite our differing views, he was always someone we felt we could do business with. And in a time where political parties are so far apart in the UK, and when debate is as poisonous as it can be at times, I think we can all take a lesson from that. Many of my colleagues around me have some wonderful stories to tell at next full council, and I'm genuinely looking forward to hearing them. Until then, I offer our deepest condolences to Kevin's friends and family, and wherever Kevin may be, I miss you, and we will miss you. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin and I knew each other quite well, but we never, ever talked politics. We met in the naughty corner at the Dons, i.e. we were both smokers. So there we were, half-time in home matches, went out to the smoking area. And we talked and talked and talked at almost all the home matches where we were both there. We talked about football. Yes, you've pinched a lot of my stories there, so I won't repeat them. But yes, he was just stunning in the work that he did to develop not just the Dons coming here, but the stadium as well. We also talked about Manchester United versus Manchester City, Liverpool and Everton. We both knew our football. I managed to indoctrinate him into Spurs versus Arsenal matches, which it was all quite interesting. So we talked football, but we also talked families. We're both grandparents, so we swapped grandchildren stories. And my daughter and grandchildren live in Stockport, and he knew that area well. And just as he cares about communities in Milton Keynes, he cared about the community in Stockport. And he was forever asking me, is this still there? Is that still there? And he was shocked when M&S moved out of Stockport, because it has made a lot of difference to the town. He was quite right. And that love of communities, the love of football, and really the love he had for his family, all generations of his family. That's what we talked about. And we talked about it time and time again. We never tired of talking about those grandchildren or about the football. And we enjoyed ourselves, even if it was pouring with rain at half-time. There we were outside with our cigarettes, and when he got quite poorly, he had sort of what I call pretend cigarettes, but he still would come out. And then when he stopped smoking altogether, when he was very poorly, he would still come out at half-time for that chat. But never, ever about politics. Just left us at the door of the stadium. And that was great. So we really got to know each other and respect each other and admire each other. And what's not been mentioned is there's a book of remembrance in reception downstairs. So if any of you would like to sign it, please do on your way out. And I know a number of people here have signed it already. Thank you. But we will all remember Kevin as a real person, a person who cared about people. Thank you.
I'm afraid that I have another death to announce. Former Councillor Tom Cleary, who served from 1982 to 1986, has also died recently. I would ask the Council to stand for a minute's silence as a mark of respect both for Kevin and for Tom Cleary. Thank you. And I now have two announcements that strike a slightly happier note. Councillor Gilbert is getting married. Congratulations, Dan. And Councillor Alice Jenkins isn't here tonight because she's at home with young Freddie, who's just arrived. We now come on the agenda to the Returning Officer's report, which is the first of a number of motions of a non-political nature, which by convention in the Council I move and the Deputy Mayor seconds. Generally, I hope, such motions are agreed by acclamation, avoiding the need for a formal vote. I therefore formally move that the Returning Officer's report be received.
Formally second.
Is the Council agreed? Agreed. And what I would like to do now is to welcome those new councillors. I'll call out their names one by one and ask them to stand. Councillor Carol Bone. Councillor George Boyer. Councillor Kerry Bradburn. Councillor Anne Cryer Whitehead. Councillor James Lancaster. Councillor Leah Montague. Councillor Nabil Nazir. Councillor Selina Raja. Councillor Lauren Townsend. and Councillor Amanda Marlowe. And then, as you know from the apology at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Paul Trendle was also elected, but is unable to be here this evening. I need to welcome back also those councillors who were re-elected, but also to say farewell to those who have left us at the recent elections. Some may be entitled to become older men or older women later on in the year, when we will consider that then. But I am putting in place measures to ensure that those who have been former councillors, but who have not served for long enough to become under people, are nonetheless kept in touch with us, because we do form a wider family, and I don't want us to simply disregard people who have been former councillors. I move on now to item 6, which is the Local Government and Housing Act 1969 and the Local Government Committees and Political Groups Regulations for 1999. I formally move that the report be noted.
Formally second.
Does the Council agree? Item 7. May I have nominations, please, for the Leader of the Council 2019-20? Hannah.
Thank you. I've been asked to do this formally and not make a fuss, but I think it'd be remiss of me to not say a few words, because I think tonight Pete has shown, as he does every night when we're in this chamber, why he is the leader of this city and what a great leader he is and why he deserves to be the leader. And we talk about Kev's leadership style, and I think it's important that we recognise that Pete is hot on the heels of Kevin and the great leaders of the city. So I just wanted to say I have the honour, as I do every year, and it's a real privilege to nominate Pete Marland.
Thank you, Hannah. Do you have a seconder?
I have the pleasure of formally seconding Pete as Leader of the Council.
Are there further nominations? I don't hear any. Play the rules. I don't hear any. Is the Council agreed?
No, I agree.
Do you wish to call a formal vote or no? I will now ask the Council to indicate, first of all, votes in favour of the nomination of Councillor Peter Marland as Leader of the Council. Thank you. I would ask for votes against. I would ask for abstentions and perhaps indicate that I'm going to set the practice this year of abstaining in all votes as Mayor in order to demonstrate the totally non-political aspect of the post.
And for me as well.
Are there any other abstentions? The result of the vote is as follows. Peter Marland is nominated as Leader of the Council with 36 votes. There were 17 votes against and there were 2 abstentions. I now come to item 8. And at this point, I need to indicate that I'll be referring from time to time to names that are on grey sheets. Not all members of the public may have these sheets, but all members of the council do. And they reflect quite a complicated nomination process on which agreement has been reached beforehand. It therefore saves a great deal of time to circulate these before the meeting and to take them largely as read, rather than to go through the detail name by name. So if things seem to be unduly hasty, that has to be regarded in the light of the talks that have taken place over the last 2 or 3 years. Would the Leader of the Council inform the Council which councillors he is appointing to the Cabinet and who will be the Deputy Leader of the Council?
As on the grey sheet, and I have selected Councillor Hannah O'Neill to be Deputy Leader of the Council.
I move on to the terms of reference for committees. Are the revised terms of reference for committees agreed? I'm taking the need for no cause for a vote. I move on to appointment of committees, groups and panels, and wish to ask if any of the group leaders want to notify the Council of any changes to the already agreed appointments to committees. Leader? No? Alex? No? Douglas?
Just to say that Councillor Riley will be a substitute for DCC.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will now move a series of recommendations, the first of which covers the appointment of committees, the number of councillors which will comprise the committees, the membership of those committees, and including any changes that have been notified beforehand. The second recommendation will refer to numbers of members on the Appeals Commission, the Chief Officer Appointments Panel, and the Constitution Commission. The third recommendation will note the agreed numbers that will comprise the Chief Officer's Appointments Panel and the appointment of substitutes to the various committees. Deputy Mayor?
Formally second.
Are the recommendations as set out agreed?
Agreed.
I move now to item 11, the appointment of co-opted members. I note that Councillor Amanda Marlowe has been elected as a councillor, and thus a vacancy is created on the Parent Governor section, which represents special schools. I therefore like to move that the co-opted members for 2019-20 on the Children of Young People Committee, that committee should be authorised to fill any vacancies that may fall due in its appointed members. Deputy Mayor?
Formally second.
Is the Council agreed? Agreed. Item 12, the appointment of other bodies. Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority. I formally move the appointments as set out on the grey sheets.
Formally second.
Are there any changes to be reported? In that case, I ask if the Council is agreed.
Agreed.
I move on to the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the NHS Accountable Care System. I move those appointments as set out on the grey sheet.
Formally second.
Changes to be reported? Is the Council agreed?
Agreed.
The next section is appointments to the LGSS Joint Committee, and I formally move those appointments as on the grey sheets.
Formally second.
Changes to be reported? Is the Council agreed?
Agreed.
And still on the LGSS, I move the appointments to the Revenues and Benefits Joint Committee as set out on the grey sheet.
Formally second.
Changes? Is the Council agreed? Agreed. And finally, the Thames Valley Police and Crime Panel, I formally move the appointment as set out on the grey sheet. Deputy Mayor?
Formally second.
Changes? I see none. I ask if the Council is agreed. Agreed. I move to item 13 and propose that the Council's meeting schedule for 2019-20 be confirmed, subject to the following changes. The date of the Cabinet Regeneration Subcommittee, scheduled for the 27th of June, will be moved to the 25th of July. The Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, scheduled for the 3rd of July, will be moved to the 11th of July, and the meeting scheduled for the 25th of September shall be moved to the 30th of October.
Formally second.
Is the Council agreed?
Agreed.
Item 14, appointment to outside organisations. I move that the Director, Law and Governance, Sharon, in consultation with the three group leaders, be authorised to agree the appointment of councillors to outside organisations, with the exception of those appointed by the Cabinet.
Formally second.
Is the Council agreed? We're nearly there. I have to technically now close the annual general meeting of the Council. And we will move on to a separate set of meetings of each committee of the Council, who will appoint their chair and their members. However, on the proverbial grey sheets, these I think are largely agreed. I hope therefore that we will be able to take these new meetings as read. Is the Council agreed?
Agreed.
In that case, the formal closure of those meetings are the only thing that lies between us and the reception. I would invite you to allow the top table, including the Deputy Mayor, to leave. We will move round to that door over there, through the lounge, and we will greet all of our guests, and I do hope you'll all be able to join us for the reception. Thank you very much for your patience so far.